We are here with a familiar face, Mattie Daughtry. Mattie, thanks for making the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, as you know, as people watching this video, we go through 5 questions, the same 5 questions with all of our candidates, so that there's some fairness there, and we'll probably end up going off on a tangent on different things. But so yeah, let's get going. Mattie, first question: what district are you running for, and where does that cover?
So I'm running for Senate District 23, which is one of the new redistricted areas. So it includes the communities of Harpswell, Brunswick, Pownal, Freeport, part of Yarmouth. There's a detailed map. Actually, if you go to my website, there's a link to which portions of Yarmouth.
Nice.
Cousins Island, Little John Island, and Chebeague Island.
Wow. Well, there you go. I knew Chebeague. I did not know the other 2 islands, so thank you for that. Yeah. As people that have watched some of these videos know, there's been some redistricting. This is one of the medium changed ones. There's a couple of the House districts are severely changed, but that's okay.
Yarmouth is what was the big change. We kept Pownal in the district, and then it sort of went down into the water of Casco Bay, is what I like to tell everyone.
Yes. We went towards the water. Mattie, tell us a little bit about your background and why you're running for office.
Absolutely. So born and raised here in Brunswick, Maine. I come from, a family that, was one of the first families out in Orrs and Bailey Island. And then, my mom and dad were able to find their way back to Brunswick. I was a graduate of 2005, of the class of 2005 at Brunswick High School, graduated from Smith College, and then really wanted to be able to try to find my way back to Maine. Moved back, was working like most Mainers, 3 to 4 jobs, seeing how hard it was to be a young Mainer, to not only be able to try to afford to live here and be able to thrive here, but also be able to afford health insurance, and was getting increasingly concerned about what the future looked like for young Mainers when a seat opened up when I was 25, ran for the state house, was able to get elected, and served 8 years in the state house. And then in 2020 was able to run for the state Senate. The joke I always like to say is some people got a pandemic puppy. I feel like, I got to be the pandemic senator. So it's been really great getting to go out and meet people, door to door, face to face, all the parades, and really getting to experience not only the new parts of the district, but what had made Senate District 24 so strong. I'm also the Assistant Senate Majority Leader. I'm one of the first freshmen that was ever elected to a position of leadership in the Senate. And from what I've been able to see, I think I'm one of the youngest female whips in Maine's history, as well in the country, which is a pretty big honor. But my life outside the legislature, I am a small business owner. I own a brick and mortar store in downtown Brunswick. I always like to joke the job that balances out my life is being able to help run Moderation Brewing. So, I get to be part of the brewing process, behind the bar, delivering beer, overseeing a staff. And what I think really is amazing about the citizen legislature that we have in Maine is everything I'm dealing with on the brewery informs my work, up in the state house. When we're talking about, electricity costs or workforce development or things that actually, they have an impact when I go home. They are things that are literally impacting my life day to day.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, and I love how you also illustrated the plight of young Mainers, and people wonder, hey, when are the kids going to come home, or will they come back, and the struggles that are real, with coming here and starting, your career here rather than in other communities where you might make more money, but there's so much fulfilling about Maine and wonderful about Maine that glad you made it back. Question number 3, the big question: what are the 3 top issues affecting Mainers right now that you look forward to working on if elected?
So, it's hard to narrow it down to 3. I think we're at a really, we're going to get some hound dog interruptions, I can tell right now. But there's tons of difficulties we all face, whether, it's buying supplies, for me, finding staff, or, filling up the tank right now. It just seems like a lot of things are a lot harder. Our wallets are getting stretched further and further, all while it feels like our civil liberties are continuously, threatened by national politics. But for me, one of the overarching things that gets brought up that not only is, near and dear to myself, but also I hear no matter where I am in the district and honestly throughout the state, is affordable housing. It's no longer just a problem, it's really a crisis. In our area, we have very little available housing stock, let alone affordable housing or middle income housing. And the fact that, most people moving into the area, I've heard folks are putting in, 50, 60 offers if they can even find an apartment or a house. The other thing is it's not just about that affordability, it's about sustainable housing. How do we make sure that people, can be here? And I'm regularly, as a legislator, working with constituents who are housing insecure, or perhaps they moved here with a good job offer and they're bouncing from hotel to hotel, making a good salary, but unable to find a place to stay. And if I think housing interplays with so many different issues, whether it's education, whether it's workforce development, whether it's aging in place for our seniors. I mean, our housing issue is really one of the driving backbones of everything. So that right now, I really think is one of the top issues we're dealing with.
I totally agree. And I'm seeing it from our chamber side. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need your basic needs met. And if your housing is unstable or it's hard to find, it shakes the core of every other part of your life. I think part of the not problem, but in some places when people retire, they go to a community that they want to live out the rest of their days in. A lot of people are already here. they want to live out the rest of their days here, which is great, except when that person from away comes to take your job, your house is not available for them to own because you're still living in it. And so that's why we just need to add more. And I love the middle income piece of this too. The story I always tell is if my house burned down tomorrow and I got the check, I would be looking for something in the 250 to 375 range. We're squarely in the middle income. If there was nothing for that, I can't go higher. So I'm going to go lower, and I'm going to take a house from somebody if that's all that they can afford. I'm always going to be able to outbid them. And so that's why you kind of need housing at that all levels, really.
Absolutely. I mean, it's something we hear about at the brewery all the time. Like I always think of, a coffee shop or a brewery as sort of like that third place. It's not your work. It's not your house. It's where you come to hang out. And we'll have people who are new to the area who ask if we've seen any housing because they're, perhaps coming through town, looking at jobs, trying to scope out the area. And it's interesting how often we hear that while we're pouring a beer, if you've heard about any housing. And the thing that I always like to say is, if you look at the median housing price in our area and in Senate District 23, it's in the 500,000 range and going up. And not only for myself, I don't think I could afford to live in this area if I hadn't been lucky enough to secure housing 7 years ago. And I look at many of my friends who are getting priced out of not only their apartments, but their homes. And, at the same time, we, are having a huge lack of staff. Look at our schools. Look at how desperate we are for staff there. I see, BIW is always hiring, Maine Health, all the hospitals. The problem is people are having to drive further and further away. Senator Eloise Vitelli and I have been convening a group of regional business leaders and communities to look at how we can approach this, not just in a Brunswick issue or a Freeport issue, because really we have to think about it from a regional approach. And General Dynamics was saying that many of their staff are driving over an hour to be able to commute one way to be able to get to their work, whether it's here in Brunswick or the Bath shipyard. It's simply unsustainable at this point.
Two other issues that you want to highlight.
Absolutely. If you can't tell, we could talk about housing all day.
Exactly. Oh, totally.
Someone who grew up on my dad, built and designed houses. So I feel like my whole life, whether it's been fixing old houses or getting to build houses with my father, it always comes back to housing.
I love it.
I'd say the second issue really is about education. And for me, it runs the full gamut. And this is one of the things, full gamut from cradle through, the end, although I don't think we ever stop learning. And this is one of the things that really got me fired up to run when I first started. And it's something that's kept me going through the entire time I've been in the legislature. And I think right now we're at a really particularly interesting part in education. Coming out of the pandemic, everyone's seen what it's done to not only all of us who, aren't in school currently, but look at, our students and the social emotional learning that we need to be able to make up, just the consistency. So, students feel like they have that sort of foundation and stability that's really been lacking over the past couple of years. Also making sure that our schools are meeting the needs that our students need for the future, that we're not dealing with an education system that's rooted in, as I like to say, in 19th century traditions for our 21st century needs. And you and I have talked about this a lot. I'm really passionate about career and technical education, getting that education in earlier, making sure that middle school students can be exposed to it, as well as potentially looking at a 4-year CTE school for our state. So students can start, ninth grade, go all the way through. And I think people don't really understand the full gamut of what CTE covers from, there's some amazing programs working with early childhood education all the way to, welding and masonry to, art.
Graphic design and yeah, creative sciences like that too. Yep.
Hospitality, and really making sure we expand that work. I know I've spoken a lot of my work on student debt I'm really passionate about. And what I think we need to really shift, and there's been a lot of work done on this, but I think it's incumbent on all of us as citizens and passionate folks about our area, is making sure that students realize how many options exist, and that education isn't always on a straight line. That we need access to CTE, we need access to college prep. We also need to make sure we're continuing to strengthen our apprenticeship programs. As the chair of the Labor and Housing Committee, this is something I really love getting to work on, and seeing the full gamut of apprenticeship programs that we have throughout our state and how much more we could have. And then also credentialing. So one of the things that is really, really exciting is making sure when people want to shift careers, that we have affordable, almost sort of like mini programs for people to sort of dip their toe in and see if this is a good fit before they have to take on that full load to be able to do a full career shift. And so for me, I'm really passionate about making sure that our educational system goes everything from your traditional, secondary education and especially early childhood education, still fighting to make sure we have universal preschool available for students and families who need it. All the way through, that workforce credentialing, that second path and that apprenticeship as well.
Credentialing is such a key too. It's something you don't hear a lot of talk about, but there are issues where, especially look at these new Mainers, looking at veterans that are returning, that they've done some of these roles, they've done these roles elsewhere, and then they come here and we're like, oh, you've been an electrician for 20 years. Well, I'm sorry, you don't have this license, so you can't be an electrician. It's like, that's ridiculous. They should have to go through a whole course to do that, and I think most people would agree with that. And so streamlining some of those things is critical.
Absolutely. And one of the things is that credentialing transfer for when people come into our state, making sure that they're able to, transfer their professional credential and background to be able to work here in Maine. And I think that is a huge barrier. And also for micro-credentialing, which not a lot of people are familiar with, one of my favorite examples is Hospitality Maine during the pandemic did a COVID-19 readiness badge that folks throughout the service and hospitality industry could go online, take the course, and then they would have the certification that they had met the Hospitality Maine standards. And I really think that's a massive, massive potential asset for businesses. Like, say you have a new refrigeration system coming online and you work in HVAC and you just want people to get a specific, badge training in that program, that's something they can go through. Or for, my partner Phil and I at the brewery, we went through a very specific, there's a type of piping we use in the brewery, and there was a course that we went through and we got our credential on how to be able to epoxy and weld this type of plumbing for our own brewery. So should we ever need to build another brewery, we have the credential, the micro credential, to show that we did this whole program.
You should have led with that. You should have led with, I know how to build a brewery. Now accepting votes. Awesome. Anything else you want to hit on while we're here, or you want to get on to the next question?
I'd say the third issue is sort of more of an all-encompassing one, and I think it does apply to the other two, but family-friendly policies is definitely something that I've been working on for years, and I'm getting increasingly more passionate about as I think about starting my own family, hopefully in the next few years. And that's everything from early childhood education, access to childcare. It's something else that's a crisis, not only in our whole area, but our whole state. I always like to, my quip is, we don't have access to childcare in the state house. The legislature doesn't have an easily accessible childcare facility for people working in the building. The wait lists for being able to get childcare not only are huge, but the cost of childcare is astronomically high for families. And at the same time, our early childhood education professionals are not getting paid accordingly with other professionals in the same, career trajectory, or just if you look at jobs across the board. And it just feels like we're not valuing that type of investment in, our children and our early, family startup. The other part I see that rolls around in that is paid family medical leave. This is something I've been passionate about since I first ran for office. And the need, I think, for it has become even more dire in the past few years. There's been talks about having paid family medical leave on the national level. But, as we always say, as Maine goes, so goes the nation. I think we shouldn't be waiting for another state to tell us what to do or what, politicians in DC want us to do. We need to create a program that's built by Mainers for Mainers. We have very different demographics than other states in the nation. We have a very, very high level of small business owners and folks employed by small businesses. I think it's something in the high 90s is the amount of folks in the state of Maine who are employed by small businesses. And we also have a large amount of self-employed people. So we need to make sure the system is something that covers folks, universally. We always say it needs to be universal, accessible, and affordable, and also have a simplicity or sort of ease of use. And so we're looking at ways to be able to make this a people-friendly and a business-friendly program that, small business in Maine can really use to leverage and attract, young families. Because, I ask people all the time why they've come to Maine or if they're thinking about moving to Maine, what are the key factors? And honestly, these type of family-friendly benefits, along with housing and education, are some of the biggest barriers for getting people to relocate here.
The childcare thing is something that we've done some work on too. I mean, I think we lost somewhere around 20% of our childcare centers during the pandemic, which is just insanity. And it's one of those things where if it doesn't affect you, you don't realize, how much it is. But I mean, it's $600, $800, $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, depending on some of these, higher end places. That's another mortgage. That's another mortgage for a lot of people to take on. And that's it. If you want to recruit young families to the area, you have to have some things in place for the young families need. So such a key point.
It's huge. And a lot of people don't realize one of the reasons we lost so many childcare centers is how hard it is to operate these places. And if you ask anyone who works in one or who's an operator, they're literally on a razor thin margin. And we really need to be making sure that we're investing in these places because it is absolutely crucial. I mean, paid family medical leave, childcare, all these above, it's actually shown when you have access to these type of programs, if you're a business owner, that you actually increase your worker retention and that you have a huge decrease in employee turnover as well. So, for me, if I was going to tackle my sort of like fourth bonus issue, like if we're looking at, struggling to be able to recruit workers and staff, also dealing with increased, costs across the board, any way we can make an investment that makes things easier on business owners, I think giving that key foundation for families to be able to come to our state is where the state can step up to help with small businesses where we can't, an average small business can't set up a childcare facility and be able to shoot for the moon. So this is where, we really need to band together to make sure we're looking out for folks to really help everyone from young families to small businesses to large businesses.
Yeah, the childcare worker pieces, because if you want to pay them more, then you have to charge the parents more. And the parents are saying, I'm paying everything I can. And so Speaker Fecto had a bill, I think, last session that was some sort of accreditation bill. So it was some of the ARPA funds that were, hey, if your childcare workers hit certain accreditation levels, then that fund, that's an interesting thing. Now, that's not evergreen money, but it's something to look at. And those are kind of some of the policies that you're looking at and dealing with.
Yeah, and to tie it back to CTE, career and technical education, through Speaker Fecto's work and some of the bills I've been really honored to co-sponsor, we've been looking at increasing the training programs through our CTE centers. So students, if they know this is where they want to go through, they can step out the door with 2 to 4 years of training in this early childhood education and get, a head start on their career.
Which is huge. Last 2 questions. If voters could only know 2 things about you before they fill out their ballot, what would those 2 things be?
I think the biggest thing is I'm from here. Everything that, we discuss and go through politically, it affects me every single day. I'm there at the brewery the majority of the time, seeing the impacts of what life is like right now. And so, any decisions that are being made at the state level, it's something that impacts me every single day. The other one I'd say is that I'm, friendly, my door is open. I think of myself as a, empathetic and kind leader. I know that's not always what, you start with, but folks who know me and work with me, I think my colleagues would say that, I'm a fierce advocate, but I'm willing to listen. And, we might not agree on something, but you have to be able to, get along and come together. I mean, heck, we name our brewery Moderation because I fully believe in that as a way of life. What I love most about my business is getting to see people come together and have difficult conversations. And I think that's one of the things that's sort of been missing over the last few years is we've sort of increasingly siloed into our different, areas. And I'm always willing to have the conversation. I'm always willing to listen. And that's what makes me stronger as a legislator and as honestly a human being. And I really love not only in the legislature getting to have those conversations, but also, I mean, I've seen several political conversations get started at the brewery with people in very diametrically opposed areas and watch them have, someone was joking, oh, it's going to be a bar fight. And I'm like, no, watch the magic of people having a real conversation. And sure enough, maybe everyone didn't have their mind changed, but there was no yelling, there was no screaming, there was, compassion and understanding. So I think one of the things that, I really try to tell folks about my leadership style is making sure we're bringing people together and that we're willing to have the hard conversations and go from there.
Mattie, I love it. I love it. Last question, easy one. What's the best way for people to connect with you to find out more about you as a candidate?
Absolutely. So you can go to my website, which is www.mattiedaughtry.com. That's MattieDaughtry.com. I'm also on social media. I'm on Instagram. It's Mattie for Maine, I do believe, or it might be Mattie Daughtry on Instagram, as well as my Facebook is Mattie Daughtry. You can find my legislative page there. Also, you can also find me around town. We're at the farmers market on Tuesdays and Fridays with the brewery. We have a booth there. That's actually where I was running from before this. And then also behind the bar, just come up, say hello. I'd love to chat. I mean, honestly, getting to talk to folks is the best part of my job.
Love it. Mattie, thank you so much. We will also include some of that in the description of the video. So if you didn't catch it, you can catch it there. Always good to talk to you, my friend.
Lovely. The last thing I'll part with, I sort of have been challenging folks about this everywhere is, ask questions of selection, especially with health at stake. Make sure you're asking people about the issues that are, core to your identity, whether it's something that's local, whether it's something state, or whether it's something more larger about like reproductive justice. Make sure you're asking all of us. And also, since, we're talking on the chamber level, I think one of the big things, one of my requests is please for business owners in the area, if you have any ideas on any of the things we talked about, please reach out. Being able to solve these really large crises, which are being impacted by international aspects that we don't have any control of, but we can make things different if we band together here. So my ask to anyone who's watching this, if you're a business owner, if you have any ideas on any of these things, please reach out. We got to put our heads together to find some creative solutions.
I love it. Mattie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cory.
All right.